3 nights, over 150,000 fans, one of the biggest concerts in K-pop history on Latin American soil. And behind all of that celebration, there is one fact that made thousands of people furious. In a performance that lasted 3 minutes and 20 seconds, Jimin appeared on the Jumbotron screen for exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Not because he wasn't performing, not because he was off stage. He was there. He was singing, he was moving, but the camera didn't catch him. The big screen didn't show him. And tens of thousands of people who bought tickets, many of whom traveled specifically to see Jimin, could only stare at a screen that kept cutting away, asking themselves, where did he go? And this was not the first time it happened. This was not a single accident that could be explained away as a technical glitch. There is a pattern here, and that is what makes this entire situation far bigger than a problem with one cameraman. Stay until the very end, because there is one detail that almost nobody has talked about specifically, and it might be the thing that changes how you see this situation most fundamentally. Hey everyone, welcome back to this channel. We don't chase drama here. We don't amplify things that don't deserve amplification, but we also don't pretend we don't see something that is clearly and visibly in front of us. If you are an army who believes that every BTS member deserves fair and equal treatment, you are in the right place. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get straight into this. First, the context, so you have the full picture. May 2026. BTS is in the middle of the Latin American leg of the WORLD Tour, the largest tour ever mounted by a Korean artist in history. Over 82 shows across 34 cities in 23 countries, every single ticket sold out. Mexico City was one of the most historic stops on the entire tour. 3 nights at Estadio GNP Seguros, May 7, 9, and 10, 2026. Over 150,000 fans total. This was BTS's first return to Mexico City in nearly 11 years. Fans from across Latin America flew in. Many had been saving money for years just to be there. And because of the size of the stadium, a large portion of the audience was seated far from the main stage. That meant the only way those fans could see the detailed expressions and movements of the members was through the giant Jumbotron screens placed throughout the venue. That is standard for any stadium concert anywhere in the world. What was not standard was what happened on those screens when Jimin performed. Let's talk about what actually happened, in order. The first night, May 7th, opened with enormous energy. Jimin was already making an impact even before anyone entered the stadium. His name was trending in Mexico before the concert started, making him the only BTS member trending in the country at that moment. Fans who were close to the stage reported that Jimin performed brilliantly, full energy, precise movement, a complete performance from start to finish. But the fans seated in the upper sections and far stands, their experience was different. Starting from that first night, May 7th, some fans began to notice something that didn't sit right. When Jimin's parts arrived in a song, the Jumbotron didn't always cut to him. Sometimes the camera stayed on another member. Sometimes the screen showed a wide shot of the entire stage. And sometimes, and this was the most frustrating, the camera would briefly find Jimin, only to cut away again before anyone could fully take in the moment. After the third night on May 10th, when all 3 Mexico City concerts had ended, the frustration that had been building across 3 nights exploded into a massive wave across social media. One of the most widely cited and most jarring data points was this. In a performance lasting 3 minutes and 20 seconds, Jimin appeared on the Jumbotron screen for exactly 2 seconds. 3 minutes and 20 seconds. 2 seconds. That number was not an assumption. It was the result of a measurement made by fans who specifically recorded and timed each member's appearance on the screen throughout that song. The findings spread across X and TikTok, creating a wave that could not be ignored. The hashtag "Stop Sabotaging Jimin" began trending immediately, and it wasn't long before that hashtag connected to a much wider context, because it turned out Mexico City was not the only place this had happened. This is where the situation escalated from a local complaint into a global issue with a much heavier weight behind it. Because when fans started digging, they discovered this was not the first time. Long before Mexico City, in Japan, specifically at the Tokyo Dome concert on April 18, 2026, there was a moment that didn't receive much attention at the time, but which now carries enormous significance. During one segment of the concert, fans watching the live stream noticed that the camera was not covering Jimin while he was singing his parts. And then something unusual happened. Jungkook, who was standing not far from Jimin on stage, was visibly caught on camera giving a gesture to the camera operator, a clear signal, "Point the camera over there," at Jimin. A gesture from a performing artist to a camera operator in the middle of a live show, asking for the camera to be directed toward his bandmate who was actively singing. That is not something that happens under normal conditions. Artists should not have to do that. That is the job of the production team, the camera team, the stage director. But Jungkook did it because the camera wasn't doing its job. When that clip spread alongside the Mexico City incidents, the reaction that followed was no longer just frustration about screen time. It became a much deeper question. Is this actually a deliberate pattern? And if it is, who is accountable?
But wait, because there is something even more striking than everything we have covered so far. And this is the part that almost no one has addressed specifically. When fans began documenting every screen time incident involving Jimin across the Arirang World Tour up to that point, the pattern that emerged was not limited to concert cameras. It extended across the entire promotional ecosystem surrounding this comeback. First, the official photo from BTS's visit to Mexico's National Palace, where only 6 members were visible in the frame, with Jimin appearing absent. That photo was shared by the President of Mexico herself through her official social media accounts. Second, in the Netflix documentary BTS The Return, which was supposed to celebrate the comeback of all 7 members, a number of fans reported that the screen time allocated to Jimin in the footage felt noticeably shorter compared to other members. Third, reports that HYBE rejected Jimin's request to grow his hair longer, a decision about personal appearance and artistic identity that any artist should have the right to make for themselves. And fourth, which happened just days after the Mexico City concerts on May 14, 2026, when FIFA officially announced that BTS would perform at the FIFA World Cup final halftime show, a CBS News New York broadcast used a BTS group photo to cover the story, a photo that showed only 6 members, with Jimin not in the frame. 4 separate incidents, 4 different contexts, one common thread. And that is what made fans stop seeing this as a series of unconnected accidents. They started seeing it as a pattern. Now let's go to the deeper analysis, because this is where this content becomes different from just another news recap. There are 2 possibilities that always exist in a situation like this, and both deserve to be considered fairly. The first possibility, this is pure production failure, incompetent camera operators, or a directing team that doesn't have a system strong enough to ensure each member receives fair coverage. This can happen, and it's not entirely unreasonable for a large stadium concert where technical coordination is extremely complex. But if that's the case, the answer is straightforward. Fix the system, add cameras, build a clearer protocol. This is the largest K-pop tour in history. The standard of production should match that scale. The second, and this is the heavier one to talk about, is that something more systemic is happening. Not because one individual is actively deciding to sabotage Jimin, but because there is an imbalance in how production prioritizes and frames different members. And at this scale of production, even unconscious bias can produce results that look like a deliberate pattern. The important thing is not to definitively decide which of these is true. The important thing is, both possibilities are equally unacceptable. Whether it's technical incompetence or unfair prioritization, both produce the same outcome: an artist who performs with everything he has, not receiving the visibility he deserves in front of hundreds of thousands of people who came to see him. And Jimin is not the member who complains publicly. He was not the first to speak up. The ones who spoke up were the fans who witnessed it directly, who paid for those tickets, who had been waiting years for this moment. Here is what I believe is the most important part of this entire story. Jimin, in the middle of all of this controversy, has released not a single word of public response. No statement, no social media reaction, no visible frustration carried onto the stage. What he did was keep performing. Every night in Mexico City, every night after that, every single time he walked onto that stage, he gave everything. Fans who were close to the stage never reported that Jimin seemed flat, or withdrawn, or less than fully committed. Quite the opposite. His acrobatic performance in Mexico City received coverage from Star News Korea as one of the most iconic moments of the entire tour. He made fans cry not out of sadness, but out of the sheer beauty of what they were watching. An artist, being sabotaged, if we choose to use that word, responded not with words, but with a performance that no one who was close enough to see it could possibly ignore. And there is something deeply moving and deeply painful about that image at the same time. Jimin works harder than almost anyone to prove his worth on that stage, while the systems around him don't consistently provide equal space to show that work to everyone in the building. That is why ARMY is angry, not because they are overreacting, but because they know exactly how hard Jimin works, and they know that work deserves to be seen by everyone in that stadium, not only for those lucky enough to have seats in the front rows. Picture yourself as one of the thousands of fans who saved up for months, maybe years, to buy a ticket to this concert. You flew in from another country. You lined up for hours for merchandise. You walked into that stadium with your heart pounding because this was your first time seeing BTS live. And then the night unfolds, and for 3 minutes and 20 seconds of a song that is one of your favorites, the member you have been waiting for appears on the screen for 2 seconds. Not because he wasn't there, not because he wasn't performing, but because the system that was supposed to show all the members fairly failed to do its job. That is what was experienced not by one person, not by two, but by thousands across 3 nights in Mexico City, and they have every right to be angry. Not in a way that causes destruction, not in a way that makes things worse, but in a way that says clearly to HYBE and the production team, this is not an acceptable standard. Not for this tour, not for this artist, not for fans who entrusted their time, their money, and their emotions to you. Jimin deserves to be seen, fully, from every corner of the stadium, by every single person who is there. And until that happens consistently, this conversation is not going to and should not stop. Before this video ends, I want to ask you directly, if you were one of the people who attended the Mexico City concerts, or if you've been following this situation from social media, what did you feel watching this unfold? Do you think this is a pattern that needs to be addressed seriously, or do you have a different perspective on what's actually happening here? Write it in the comments. I read every single one, and I genuinely believe that an honest and calm conversation about situations like this is far more useful than misdirected anger that doesn't lead to anywhere constructive. One thing I am certain of, Jimin is an extraordinary artist who deserves to perform in the best possible conditions, supported by the best possible team. And if something needs to change for that to happen consistently, then that change needs to be called for, clearly, and kept being called for until it arrives. If this video gave you a more complete picture of what's actually going on, share it with a fellow ARMY, because the more people who understand the full context, the more constructive a conversation we can build together. Subscribe if you haven't already. Deep, fair analysis without unnecessary drama, that is what this channel is always trying to bring to you. Until the next one, take care of yourselves, and as always, Purple You.